Hi there, my name is Erin. I'm the owner of EVT Consulting and I specialize in small business bookkeeping. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some bookkeeping for photography. It's fairly simple, but QuickBooks is a little bit of a beast. So we're going to go through some of the basics and a lot of the features that you will be using when you do your photography bookkeeping. So here we have the QuickBooks Online dashboard. The first thing you're going to want to do when you start your QuickBooks subscription is you're going to want to make sure that your company information is accurate. So we're going to click in here. You can upload your logo so that appears on all of your invoices. You're going to edit your company name, how it appears legally on all of your tax documents, your EIN or SSN, whichever one you're going to be using for your company. There are some other details that you can include as well. If you have a company email address that's different from your personal or the one that you use for your communication, your website address, phone number. There are separate options for your company address and customer facing address. This would be your company address is where you receive all of your mail, where all of your tax documents go, and a customer facing address sometimes is a PO box or a corporate address that you can rent an address from so that your customers aren't seeing your home address. So once you have all of your company information in there and accurate, we're going to look here at the dashboard. So here you're going to find easy access to a few different items that you will likely use. Some of you may be using invoicing software outside of QuickBooks. There is a feature to use QuickBooks for invoicing as well. So you can either record invoices in QuickBooks just for your own personal use, or you can use the invoicing to create the invoice and send it to your customer in order to receive payment that way as well. Okay, so here's our invoice dashboard. So we're going to act like we are invoicing a customer as if we are using all of the invoice features in here. So we're going to create an invoice, send an invoice to a customer, and I can show you some different ways that you can receive payment from QuickBooks or through QuickBooks. So we're going to select a customer. This is just a test company file, so there's no real company information or anything in here. So we're going to choose a customer. We're going to choose our terms, so how quickly you anticipate or expect to be paid. A due date for the invoice will either populate based on your terms, or you can enter a custom due date here. You'll enter your product or service, and you can customize all of these to your services that you provide, whether it's prints, whether it's photography sessions. All of that can be customized to include rates and taxes and everything that you need in there. Invoices allow you to input discounts if you offer those options to a customer. And there are also sales tax settings as well, depending on which state that you're in. Some have sales tax and some do not, usually for purchases of materials, not necessarily services. But that's something that would be determined by the state that you are operating in. But those are customizable as well. So here we can either save the invoice, which would save it into your QuickBooks account, but it would not send it to your customer. Save and send would do both. It would send it to your customer directly in an email. Save and share link would give you a URL that you can share to your customer, and they can pay through that URL. So we're going to say save and send. In this invoice, you have the ability to edit your invoice email as well. So this will be in the body of the email with the invoice attachment. I'm not going to send this one because it's the test company file, so we don't need to do that, but it will send to your customer directly. Now we're going to take a look back at our dashboard and see some of these other features. Let's see. So review transactions is something that you will get used to seeing often in your bookkeeping for your business. QuickBooks allows you to link your bank accounts and credit card accounts directly, which allows them to download the transactions from your bank so that you don't have to manually enter every single transaction that you've done. So here, this test company has a checking account, a savings account, and a credit card account here. So once you link your account, it's going to provide all of these transactions that have taken place in your bank account for you to review and input into QuickBooks. Most companies will have separate bank accounts for their business transactions, and that is recommended to keep everything accurate. But if there are accounts in which you use for personal and business transactions, there are ways to exclude the personal payments and only keep the business transactions in QuickBooks. There is another version of QuickBooks called QuickBooks Self-Employed, and this is a smaller, more limited version of QuickBooks. It is less expensive, but it is structured specifically for a sole proprietor that has personal and business transactions to be included or excluded. So if you're just starting out or if you don't have a lot of transactions, that may be an option for you, but those QuickBooks Self-Employed accounts are much less robust and you can't do a lot of customization. So it is a little bit limited as well. This version is QuickBooks Online, and there are several different tiers of that for different budgets and needs as well. So here we are seeing the transactions from this bank account, and it will try to match a category either based on settings that you've already created, your history, or keywords that it finds in the transactions. So here, Books by Bessie sounds like a bookkeeper. So we are going to edit this and we're going to change it from uncategorized income to professional fees. So let's see, you can type right in here. Let's see, legal and professional fees. This one has sub-accounts entered. You may have to customize these sub-accounts yourself. But here we're going to customize, or we're going to categorize this one as bookkeeper fees and add, and that will take this off of the review screen and it will put it directly into your tracking into that category of bookkeeping professional fees. If you're going to exclude a payment, all you need to do here is check the box for that transaction, and we're going to say exclude. And that would mean that that is not a business expense or income, and you would not like it to be included in your business transactions. App transactions allows you to link different softwares to your QuickBooks account to track those transactions a little bit more accurately. For example, if you're using a payroll software or using Square to receive payments, using Shopify to sell any products, those types of apps can be linked directly to your QuickBooks account, so that data can get put directly in there and you don't have to manually do any of that. Rules is an option that you have where QuickBooks will follow these rules when transactions come through that match them. So for example, let's make a new rule and I can show you how these work. So if we're going to call this rule, let's say Amazon purchases, and let's say you only use your Amazon account to buy supplies for your photography business. You don't use it for any other purpose. So this is going to be money out, meaning you're spending money in any bank account, and it will include either any or all. So that will give you a little bit of a different filter. We'll say description contains Amazon. So that means if any of these transactions are payments with a description that contains the word Amazon, Then we are going to assign it to an expense category and supplies. And the payee will be Amazon. Not added in here, but you can easily add new payees, and I'll give you a little pop-up to edit their information afterwards. You can select customer accounts, and tags are another way for tracking in QuickBooks that aren't necessary always, but if you have a high level of categories or transactions that you need to track in different ways, tags can help you do that. So auto add means that you do not have to review those transactions at all. It will automatically approve those transactions and put them into the expense category supplies. So if we save that, then any transaction with Amazon will go directly into the supplies account. All right, now heading back to the dashboard one more time, we're going to look at a shortcut for seeing reports and trends. Reports and trends will allow you to track your income and expense information easily at a glance. Let's see when this loads here. There are standard built-in reports, which you will likely use. Profit and loss and balance sheets are used by accountants and tax professionals at the end of the year to determine your tax responsibilities. So those will likely be used at least annually. You can also view them throughout the year to see kind of where you stand. Profit and loss is probably the most informational for the purposes that you would want to see. It will show you your total income, your total expenses, and whether you're profitable or whether you have losses for that time. So we'll include all of your different income accounts, all of your costs, and it will give you your net operating income and your net income. The balance sheet does have a lot of useful information as well. It's not as applicable to your everyday use as the profit and loss may be. This includes asset and liability information. So if you have loans that you're working on paying back, those are considered liabilities. Assets such as inventory or equipment, some of the more expensive cameras, computer equipment, that kind of thing will be included in your assets. You also have some built-in collections reports. So if you have invoices that are aging that haven't been paid yet, it will give you the information there. You can pull up information by customer or invoice type. Those will allow you to see how much work you're getting from specific customers or what type of products are selling better than others. You also have an option to create custom reports, and that can get a little complicated, so I'm not going to get into that in this video. But this allows you to create reports that can basically pull up information of almost any type from your QuickBooks information, and that can be helpful for a lot of different reasons for your business. Okay, next we're going to go back into invoices, and I'm going to show you a few more things in here. There's also another way to get here other than the dashboard. In this column here, sales and invoices will take you to the same place. So that will give us all of our invoice options. So here you have the ability to do estimates. So an estimate will record what you provide fee-wise to a customer without engaging them for an actual job. So if someone's asking you what would it cost to do such and such project, you can provide an estimate without recording that as income or potential income in your QuickBooks account. Payment links, we talked a little bit. Those are URLs that you can send through QuickBooks to get payments from your customers. Let's see. And here under customers, we can see tracking information for all of the customers that have provided income through the course of your business. The first thing you're going to want to do with a customer is you're going to want to make sure that you have all of the proper information in their profile. So here we can click edit, and this is where we see all of your customer information. Now, if you're providing, small products like prints or something like that, you may not have complete information for someone. You may just have their email and mailing address or whatever you have here. But you do want to include as much information as possible in the event that payment is not received so that you can reach out to them for collection purposes later on. From the customer tab, you can also add a new transaction for that customer. So let's say we've already created an invoice for this customer. Now we want to receive a payment. So let's say they sent us a check, and so it didn't go through QuickBooks. It wasn't recorded yet into your bank account, but you want to record this check payment so that it shows up as paid while you're waiting for that check to clear in the bank. So we're going to receive a payment from Amy's Bird Sanctuary, and that autofills when you receive a payment from the customer tab. Let's say the payment date is today. They are paying us with a check. The reference number will be their check number. We're going to say 1234 for our purposes. And we are going to be depositing this into our checking account. We have received a check for $239. And they have this matching invoice here for $239. So let's say this is the invoice that they're paying. We're going to check this one. Those amounts match, so there's no credit to apply. Save and close, and that will record the payment and link it to the invoice that you've checked in that window. One more detail that I wanted to mention is you can also attach any contracts or any attachments that you may need to include with a customer. Let's say you have a long-term project going on, and you've created a contract to keep track of the fees and the time that will be included. Those attachments can be uploaded here into their customer details as well. You can also include custom settings for late fees. So if you have a payment policy where if they don't pay within 30 days or something, you can include a late fee. So once that invoice ages past a certain date, it will automatically update to include that late fee. Products and services is the place where you will customize all of your information that will appear on an invoice. So this sample company is a construction company, so their categories are going to be much different than ours. But we can create a product or service here. And let's say this is for an in-person photography session. So we're going to call it a service. And we're going to say photography session fee. And SKUs, if you're selling prints or anything like that, you might have SKU numbers if you have a tracking system that uses those, but likely you will leave that blank. The category does not fit into any of the ones in the sample company, so I'm going to create a new one called photography services. You're going to check, yes, I sell this product service to my company. If you would like a description to be included on your invoice for this product, you would enter it here. You can also include a standard sales price or rate, and that will auto-populate into the invoices, or you can leave it blank if you're custom quoting everything individually. If you don't have a set fee for things, you could leave this one blank as well. If you live in a state that requires that you collect sales tax, that's where you would enter this information here. And if you are purchasing this product from a vendor, you would check here. So since we said we're selling this product, this one will be checked. We're not purchasing this product, so that one is unchecked. So we'll save and close, and that product and service is now able to be populated directly onto your invoice when you create those. Okay, so now we have covered income that's coming into your company. Now we're going to take a look at expenses or money that is going out. So we're going to click into this expense tab here. And vendors are people that you are paying for business purposes. So if we click into vendors, we're going to see all of these vendor accounts. For photography, it might be the company that you purchase your film from, the company that you purchase your photography equipment or software from. Those are all considered vendors. And just like in customers, you can go into each one and you can edit their information. If you can edit here in the edit drop down, or you can go into vendor details and see their information here. You can attach any contracts or add any information that needs to be included here. Bills is a feature that some people like to use and some people don't. What you can do here is you can create an expense that is not paid yet. So if you know that you're going to be paying your film supplier a certain amount on a certain day, you can include that bill here and it will give you reminders that that bill needs to be paid. However, some people don't like tracking them that way because it can cause a little bit of confusion when those bills are automatically paid. They don't always link, so you have to remember to link those expenses to those bills. Now, in the expense tab, these transactions, if your bank account is linked, will automatically go into your QuickBooks account. So these have already been categorized, and this here is just a list of your expenses, and it allows you to review these and edit them if needed. Okay, I'm going to quickly revisit the vendor tab. For tax reasons, if you pay a single vendor over $600 in 1 year and they are not a corporation, so if they're a sole proprietor or an LLC, you are required to provide them a 1099 form at the end of the year. So for those purposes, let's use Books by Bessie to look at this vendor again. So the things that we're going to want to have in order to track whether we need to give them a 1099, we want an email address, a phone number, and a current mailing address. This information will populate on the 1099 form, and you will either be emailing or mailing a 1099 to them. So one or both of those would be required. You will also need their tax information. So if you know that you're going to be paying someone over $600 in the year, you will request a Form W-9 from them, and this will indicate what their business type is, whether they're a sole proprietor, LLC, or corporation, and it will also have their tax ID number, so either an EIN or a social security number, whichever they use. So once you receive that from them, you will include their tax ID number here, and just for example purposes, an EIN is formatted this way, and a social security number, I'm sure you're all familiar with those, are formatted this way. And if the W-9 indicates that they're a sole proprietor or a LLC, you will check this box that says track payments for 1099, and that will allow them to populate on your 1099 report at the end of the year so that you can determine if you need to send that form to them. Those W-9 forms that you receive can also be saved and uploaded into their vendor profile account. They can be uploaded into their vendor account so that you have those on file, and you don't have to review that information if for some reason the tax ID number or information gets lost. Okay, next we're going to look into the expenses tab again, and I'm going to show you how to create a manual expense. So this will be used if for some reason your bank account didn't download your transactions properly, or maybe you used a personal account or an unlinked account to pay for a business expense. We would need to manually add those transactions. So when you're adding a transaction, you can either select a bill to apply to that transaction, or you can create an expense or a check. So we're just going to do a regular expense. So let's say we made a purchase with our personal debit card. So let's say we'll use one of their built-in vendors. And we paid our insurance company with our personal card by mistake. So we are going to, the checking account is the linked checking account. So we don't want it to be added to that, because at the end of the month, when you look at your transactions, they won't match if this transaction took place in a different account. Same thing with savings and MasterCard, all of these other linked accounts. So we are going to create a new account. And we're going to, oops, close. We're going to call it our personal, hang on one second. Checking. And this will allow us to enter this into an account that is not going to change our records for the linked accounts. So this is a bank account. We're going to call it a checking account. The name, personal checking, will work for the description as well. It is not a sub-account of anything. This would mean that if it was linked somehow, or if it was attached to a different account, you could create them together. And let's say we're going to start tracking from the beginning of this year. So we don't want to have transactions older than that. And this will allow us to track the account balance if you would like to do so. If you don't want to track any of those transactions, you can leave that one blank. So we are going to save and close here. So now we paid our insurance through personal checking today. And let's say check, because debit is like a e-check almost transaction. These are those tags that we talked about earlier that allows you to track your transactions a little bit more in depth, but we don't need to do that here. So our category is where this is going to fall on our profit and loss sheet. So our insurance expense should have its own category. Oops, there we go. It's just a little slow to load. So our insurance expense is here. And we can put in a description. So if this is vehicle insurance, or if it's liability insurance, you can include that here. We can put in our amount. Let's say it was $100. If we need to pay tax on that, then we can include that as well. And then we can save and close, and that will manually add the transaction into your QuickBooks account. And that expense has been saved and categorized as you've recorded it. Okay, the next section we're going to talk about is payroll, and I'm going to go over this one a little bit quickly because many new companies don't necessarily use the payroll function. There are some benefits to using payroll, even if you are the only person in your company. If you include yourself on payroll, you can pay those payroll taxes up front instead of paying them all at the end of the year when you file your income return. So that is an option depending on which state you're in. It may have more or less benefits for you, but you are able to pay yourself through payroll. So that is an option. This will also give you more of a consistent paycheck. You can schedule different payment amounts. You can pay yourself based on commission for how much volume that you've had for that particular month or week. So it will just give you a little bit more consistency and regular tax payments versus paying them all at the end of the year. There are a couple of different ways to do payroll. QuickBooks does have a payroll function where you can pay employees and taxes directly from your QuickBooks account. That's where you'll see all of this information. You can add the employees here, all of their tax information, create paychecks, and then it will give you the step-by-step and breakdown for all of the payroll taxes as well. There is an additional fee to add QuickBooks payroll into your QuickBooks Online account. There are also payroll services outside of QuickBooks, such as Patriot or Gusto or ADP. These are companies where you provide the payroll information, such as the employee information, the rates, and and their hours and everything that you need to create the payroll, the paychecks, and then they will create those paychecks for you as well as paying the payroll taxes. But those are at a cost as well. One feature that I would expect all photographers to use is mileage. And mileage can be tracked for tax deductions at the end of the year. There is a standard deduction for how many miles you travel for business purposes. So here, QuickBooks gives you the 65.5 cents per mile. That is the standard deduction. There is a QuickBooks phone app that you can install that will record your trips for you. So all you have to do is hit a button and say, I'm starting a trip for business purposes. And then when you get there, you hit end and it ends your business trip. That will create a trip log for you. And all you have to do is input the reason for the trip in each one. And it makes it super easy to track. You can also add trips manually through QuickBooks. And I can show you a quick trip to add here. So you would put in your date. Let's say we're traveling 5 miles and we're going from home. You can save your addresses in here. Oops. We're just going to use some fake addresses here. And we're saying this is for business purposes. And we are meeting with a client. So if you're going to a photography session, you would use meeting with a client. Other options are picking up supplies. If you're picking up film or picking up any supplies that you'd be needing for your business. If you're delivering or dropping off product, you would use this one here. Rideshare driving you probably wouldn't use very often, but that just means that you are essentially carpooling for business purposes. So here we'll say meeting with a client. You can set up different vehicles so you can track different mileage on different vehicles if that is needed. And round trip will create 2 trip entries, one going to the business location and then one returning from the business location. So if you're leaving from and going back to the same location, you can do round trip. Otherwise, you'll want to have a separate trip going to the ending location for your return trip. And here we go. It will give you a potential deduction, and you can see all of these reporting options as well. You can see how much you drive or how frequently you're making trips in different months out of the year, and we'll give you a lot of cool information too. The app does also let you record personal trips, and you can remove those as needed as well in the app. Another really cool function that the QuickBooks app on your phone has is you are able to scan receipts for any purchases that you make. That will allow you to link them directly to your transactions here. I kind of glanced over this bit a little bit, but I can go back. So when you scan a receipt in your app, it will upload into this tab here, receipts. Sorry, it's loading a little bit slowly. So these receipts that you scan and upload, they will appear down here, kind of like the transactions did in a list. From there, you can review those receipts and link them to different transactions within your QuickBooks profile. So there aren't any sample ones here to review. Let me see if there's any examples that we can use. I don't see any, but it's fairly simple. You click on the receipt upload, and then you enter the date and the amount, and then you link it to any transaction or expense that has already been entered. If you have not reviewed the transactions in banking yet, they will not be able to link, so you'll need to review your banking transactions first prior to linking any receipts. Okay, so the next section I want to show you is called the chart of accounts. You're going to find this in accounting, and you'll select chart of accounts, and this will show you not only the accounts that you have linked to, not only the bank accounts that you have linked, but also all of those transaction categories that you've used, and this will have a record of all of those accounts. So here you see your checking, your personal checking, savings. These little arrows mean that they're linked to QuickBooks, so those are the ones that automatically update and download. Here are your asset categories. We've got accounts payable, accounts receivable, liability, equity, income, and down here expenses. So this will give you a quick at a glance view of all of these important accounts here. And you can also go into each individual category and view transactions in each one. So if you want to look at this transaction account in the last 90 days, you can see all of the transactions. In the sample company, there aren't any, but it would show you all of the transaction data down here for this specific account. One very important thing that happens in the chart of account is it will show you all of those categories. So you want to make it as efficient as possible so you're not looking at a ton of categories that don't apply. QuickBooks, when you start your account, will try and guess which categories you're going to use, and some of them will likely never be used by you. So you will want to remove those accounts so that you don't have to look at all of these extra ones. So for example, let's say, can delete. Okay, let's say you don't have a physical location and you just use your laptop at home. So you probably won't have any pest control services for a warehouse or anything like that. So if you needed to remove one, you just use this little drop down and select make inactive. This reduces usage, means that it will reduce the amount of data that your QuickBooks company file is using. Some of the accounts will reduce that usage and other ones will not. This one does reduce the usage. So let's say we're going to inactivate that one. And in this company file, we can't delete that one because it's already in use for a test transaction. But if that were to go through, the pest control services one would no longer show up on your chart of accounts. When we are categorizing our transactions, there are a couple of accounts that we want to avoid using. And those ones are the ones that you see other or uncategorized in. Those accounts are useful if you're not sure where to put them, or if you're waiting to find out what details of the transaction will more specifically apply. But those in general, especially if you're using a CPA at the end of the year, we want to kind of try and avoid using those to use more specific categories that fit the transaction better. Another thing that you'll want to avoid doing in terms of accounts and categorization is you want to try and avoid creating unnecessary accounts. So for example, let's say you have bank charges and you have a checking fee for your checking account, and you also have a fee that applies to your savings account and your credit card annual fee. So all of those can go into bank charges. You don't need to create sub-accounts that say bank charges for checking, bank charges for savings, bank charges for credit cards. They can all be lumped into that bank charges account. So we want to avoid creating extra accounts that don't necessarily need them. That will just complicate your chart of accounts, and it will complicate your profit and loss statement at the end of the year as well. Okay, and next we are going to look at reconciliation, and this is one of the, I think, most important aspects of business bookkeeping, and it's also probably the most overlooked portion of business bookkeeping. An account reconciliation is essentially when you receive your bank statement at the end of each month. It will give you a detailed transaction list as well as detailing any fees or anything else that had taken place in that account. The reconciliation compares that statement to the information in QuickBooks, and it keeps everything accurate. So QuickBooks is like most softwares where it can glitch. There can be errors where a transaction for some reason doesn't get downloaded, or possibly duplicate transactions have gone through, or maybe you accidentally excluded a transaction that needed to be included. So reconciliation will help you correct any of those issues. So here you're going to have your bank statement handy, and then we're going to look at the books in QuickBooks and compare it to the statement. And then at the end of that, when everything matches, that account has been reconciled. So if we're looking at checking, the beginning balance here should match the beginning balance that shows up on your bank statement. So for example purposes, this one's 5,000. Let's say the ending balance, which will be on your statement as well, we'll say 6,000. And we'll say we are reconciling for January 31st, 2023. Oops. And then we will start reconciling. Sorry, a little slow. Okay, so here it is going to pull up all of the transactions that have not been reconciled yet in your account through the date on your statement, so January 31st, 2023. So there are going to be a bunch of pop-ups for some useful tips once this finishes loading. Okay, so I'm going to close out these little tips here. Okay, so depending on your statement and your transactions and how your banking account is set up and everything, QuickBooks may try and guess which transactions are included on your statement. I always uncheck those guesses because I would rather check them myself and make sure that those are the correct ones to be included rather than let QuickBooks guess and possibly be incorrect. So if there are any checked, what I do is I select all of them, and then I will deselect all of them, and that will ensure that none of those transactions are checked when you get started. So now we are working from scratch, and you're going to go through your transaction list on your bank statement, and you are going to check all of the transactions that are included. So what you're going to see is the balances here are going to be changing because you are adding and subtracting money based on your income and your expenses. And then what you're going to want to see is once you get through all of the transactions on your bank statement, this difference here should equal 0. And once it equals 0 and you've gotten through all of those transactions on your statement, then that means that you're ready to reconcile. So this save for later will turn into a reconcile or a complete reconciliation. This one's never going to match because we don't have an actual statement to work off of. And the other thing that you're going to want to notice and be aware of is when you're reconciling, if you are seeing that there are old transactions that are still on this reconciliation list, that means that they have not reconciled. And you're going to want to go back into those transactions and double check and make sure that they're not duplicates, make sure that they're not incorrectly added, and make sure that they are legitimate expenses that need to be included in your books. And if so, they may be in the incorrect account. So since we're reconciling checking, the only transactions in here should be accounts that took place or transactions that took place in that checking account. So if you do find that some of these are in this account in error or they need to be edited, you can click directly into them and you can make some changes here, or you can go, I believe, if you double click here and then edit, it should take you into the full view of the transaction and you can make changes from there. So let's say this one here was a duplicate and we found out this does not need to be entered because it's already been entered once in checking and that one had reconciled. So this here is going to be an extra payment that we need to remove from our QuickBooks account. Okay, so here is that transaction, and we've determined that this is an incorrect payment. It's a duplicate, and we do not need this any longer. So here next to save and close in the drop down, oh, that's not the right one, under more is where you're going to find it. We are going to delete this bill payment completely. So it's saying that it's linked to others. So what you're going to want to do if it's a transaction that's linked is you're going to want to find those other linked transactions. This is a bill payment, so likely it would be a bill, and make sure that that gets linked to the correct payment that was reconciled. So we're going to say, yes, we want to delete it because it is a duplicate. And if needed, we can go back to that bill payment and the correct bill payment and link the bill to that one. Okay, and now you'll see after we deleted that one, it is no longer in your reconciliation summary, so you do not need to worry about that transaction any longer, and you can continue reconciling. The last thing that I was going to talk about is some of the year-end tasks that you will likely need to do if you're managing your own bookkeeping. We already talked about 1099s for contractors and vendors. What you'll see here is under taxes, you can go into 1099 filings. And here you'll be able to view the reports and find out how many 1099s that you'll need to process. So if we go through here, we're going to get started. It's going to give us some information to review to make sure that it's looking at the correct information. So first, it's going to want you to review your own company information. So if you're missing this information, you'll need to add it before proceeding. So we're going to say save our address. Hang on here. It's giving us a fake address. It's not working. Let's go. It's double checking the zip codes against the cities. So let's see if this one will work. Here we go. Okay, so now it's going to want a phone number, a tax ID, and now with all that information added, now you can click next and you'll go onto your accounts. So this is going to ask you to map your accounts. And what that means is you are selecting which vendors are getting paid on which 1099 form and which expense accounts will be linked to those. So the most common is non-employee compensation, which is what you'll use for most vendors. If you're using, or if you're giving a 1099 to a landlord or something like that, paying rent for a space, it would go in the rents box here. Some of these other ones are different ones that you likely won't use, but here we are going to choose which account will be put into non-employee compensation. So let's say any of our supply accounts. Supplies. Okay. We can also add another one for, let's see, I think the example that we used was professional fees. Oops, that one didn't check. We'll go, oops. Bookkeeper expenses was that professional fees that we had used as an example before. So now we can go on to next. So anything in that bookkeeper box and the supplies box will be mapped to get a 1099 if they meet the threshold. So let's see, to see which ones meet the threshold, which is at $600 per year, we're going to click next. And there are not any that populate on here, but if there were, you would see the company names, the amount that they've received in payments. NEC is the number that's going to be on that 1099 NEC form. If there are any transactions that have been excluded, so let's say that one contractor provides you with bookkeeping services, but they also provide you with a different service. If one of those is applicable for a 1099, but the other is not, you may see excluded payments on here, but likely you won't. And then the 1099 total that will appear on their 1099. And then you can go here, finish preparing your 1099s, and it will take you step by step through creating and sending those 1099 forms. Depending on which service you use, if you go through QuickBooks or through a different service to prepare your 1099s, you will need to have them submitted to the IRS, the state agency that is applicable for you and your company, and also send to the vendor. Some services do all of that for you, and others you need to handle some or part of that manually. Okay, another task that you'll need to do at the end of the year, if you are using the payroll function, is processing W-2s. Now, if you are the only employee, you still need to give yourself a W-2. If you are using a payroll software, like we talked about, Patriot or ADP or Gusto, oftentimes those will handle the W-2 portion for you. But you will want to confirm that and make sure that they will before you decide if you do or do not need to handle them on your own. If you are working through QuickBooks Payroll, you will need to handle the W-2s yourself. I believe that is in the payroll function. I don't know that it will show us the steps to create those W-2s because I don't have a sample payroll subscription here in the sample company. But essentially, you would go through and confirm your employee information, confirm all of the amounts of their payroll and the taxes paid, and then those W-2s will be processed through this payroll tab as well. Okay, well, that concludes the quick run through of QuickBooks Online that I wanted to go through with you guys today. If you have any questions or if you would like to inquire about bookkeeping services or a individualized tutorial for your personal company, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My name is Erin Turco. I can be reached at the phone number listed, 408-712-9315. And my email address is Erin, ERIN .evtconsulting@gmail.com, or my website is www.evt-consulting.com.